this. And you should be able to see an indicator in your screen. On my computer, it's in the upper left, and it shows that we are recording this, so that whenever you get on a Zoom meeting, you want to check and make sure if you're being recorded or not. You can check for that symbol on your screen indicating that we are recording. Okay, so I think we've got just about everybody that registered is joined at this point. Oops, as soon as I said that, one more person joined. So this is there is a chat in your screen. Hopefully you can all tell when you have some controls. There's an icon that says chat under it. If you have any questions or issues that you want to raise while we're talking, I am Diane Blankenbaker-Tidwell, as I said earlier, and my co-host Sheila Wilson is also on, and she is going to be monitoring the chat so that if anybody has any questions, you can just post that in the chat session. Be aware that I am going to be sharing my screen at some point, and so everybody is going to be able to see those chat messages potentially. So don't say anything to me you don't want everybody to see. But, and of course, we're recording as well for those of you that just joined. So be aware that we are recording this live. Okay, so let me go ahead and start by sharing my presentation material. Okay, so somebody give me a thumbs up if you can see my presentation. All right, thanks. Oh, I have one more person joining. Let me admit them. So I am Diane Blankenbaker-Tidwell, and I am the owner of Arbitration and Mediation Services. And I am teaming up with Sheila Wilson today. I think many of you know Sheila, and I'm going to let Sheila introduce herself.
I can't see myself, but hi, I'm Sheila Wilson. I want to thank all of you for taking the time out of your day to join us today. Diane has put together a wonderful presentation for your, or specifically for the members of the Chattanooga Bar Association. I've been a court reporter in Chattanooga, the only place I've reported, and have been active here for about 34 years. I have always done my very best to support the CBA and its members, and I'm happy to share what little bit of information I have for you today. And so we do thank you, and do just want to say just real quickly that this is a unique situation, clearly, that all of us are in right now, and we're all learning. But at the end of the day, technology is a great thing, and we do have to embrace it, but we have to just be aware of not just its limitations, but we have to know how to properly implement it in our work life. And hopefully we'll be back on the street, all of us, very soon. So thank you, and I'll turn this back over to Diane.
Thanks, Sheila. And so I'll give you a little bit of background about me. I know a lot of you don't know me. I came onto the scene in Chattanooga a few years ago, kind of on a whim, to be honest. And as the years went by, I eventually met Jerry Tidwell, and that resulted in me making a major leap in careers. I actually had a 28-year career in the software industry before I teamed up with Jerry and started running Tidwell & Associates, and also decided to reopen arbitration and mediation services and had this major career change. As somebody in the software industry for almost 30 years, I also used a lot of online collaboration platforms. I worked for companies like AT&T and Lucent Technologies and IBM, and worked with people all around the world. So we had to do online collaboration in some form or fashion, really from the time I started my career. I sent my first email in 1989 at AT&T working for Bell Laboratories, and I was on my first WebEx in about, probably 1996, 1997. So this is something that's very familiar to me. I am a technically proficient person. I am more of a business person than I am a technologist, but I certainly have been neck deep in technology for a lot of years. So this is something that is perhaps a little more natural to me than a lot of folks in the legal community. And no offense, but if my husband, Jerry Tidwell, is any example of the average adoption rate of technology in the legal industry, it seems like it's a little bit slower than in the software industry. So I do want to just reiterate for those of you that joined late that we are recording this session and we are going to make this available for replay. I also want to just make sure that you see that you have an option to enter chat messages. Those chat messages are being monitored by my co-host Sheila Wilson, and she will interrupt if there's anything that needs to be shared. And I did set you all to mute by default, so that as to minimize background noises and so forth. Okay.
Diane, as attendees are asking to join, I have been clicking to admit. And those
perfect.
who want to, if you do not see the chat box, if you'll gently hover over the bottom of your screen, that will highlight that.
Thank you, Sheila. Okay, so the first topic on the agenda is just a little bit about how does one choose an online meeting platform. And this, of course, begs the question, what is a platform? And a platform has some very specific technical definitions, and then they have some more, we'll call it conversational definition. And really, for the purposes of this discussion, we're going to call this a platform quite literally, like if you were going to stand up in front of an audience and you wanted a stage to stand on so you could talk to them and they could all see and hear you, then that would be your platform for having this meeting. So you can really just think about an online meeting platform in this context as the tools that you're going to need and use in order to collaborate online. And the first step whenever you're trying to choose any kind of software solution, certainly, and perhaps anything really, is to think about what are your requirements. So what is it you want to do with this? And what does that mean that you need to be able to have in terms of features? And for me personally, at one point in my career, I was a technical sales engineer, and I used to work with clients on helping them define what problems they were trying to solve and what solutions were going to best meet their needs. So that's kind of where I start when I'm picking software myself. And we call the stuff that you got to have, even if you don't really care about it from a usability perspective or something you actually want to do, you just call them table stakes. So one of the table stakes requirements for just about anybody in the legal industry is probably going to be security, top of the list, right? Everybody wants to protect their clients' information. We don't want to have breaches or security hacks. So one of the things that was curious to me about the legal industry when I first made this career change is that there isn't a strict guidance about here are the standards for security for people in the legal industry as there are in healthcare and in financial services and accounting. So my personal feeling is that using the HIPAA standard is a good way to go in terms of making sure that you have a great deal of confidence in the level of security that's being offered when somebody offers HIPAA compliant security. And one of the pieces of that security is called end-to-end encryption, which means that your data is basically coded in a way that other people can't read it. And you want to make sure that it's both coded in transit and at rest, which just means that when it's being transmitted through the cloud, it can't be read if somebody manages to intercept it. And when it's actually on your device, it's also encrypted so that somebody can't read it in case they were to break into it. So those are pretty much the bottom line. Got to have those security requirements. There are other standards to look at as well. And I certainly encourage anybody that's looking at how do you do this online to consider what other security standards are available as an example of the kind of security that would be best for you. The other requirement I had is I wanted it to be really easy to use and administer. And the fact that all of you were able to join today is very encouraging to me that this was relatively easy for you to use. I found that I had a short list of 2 possible solutions out of all the online collaboration tools that I've used in the last, gosh, 20 years-ish. I have kind of narrowed it down. I had narrowed it down to 2. Zoom being very easy to use, and Teams, which is a Microsoft product, being very inexpensive because the license for Teams is actually included in an Office 365 license. So you can, if you are subscribing to Office 365, you can actually use Teams without additional cost. However, while Teams does have very good security, they do not have great usability, especially not for the administrator. And so my bottom line was I couldn't make it work with third parties within an hour. So I knew I could get Zoom up and going in 5 minutes. And so Zoom became my first choice. And it is very affordable, which is another one of my requirements. So it really was not worth it for me to invest a lot of time with Microsoft support trying to figure out why Teams wouldn't let third parties join after working my way through 8 pages of configuration settings. The other piece of this is that I need to have controls that will let me manage the meeting so that I can protect the privacy effectively. And in particular, in the context of mediations, I want to have the ability, and I may not have mentioned this, but I am a Rule 31 mediator myself, as well as somebody that is arranging and hosting mediations for the mediators that use my service. So we want to make sure that we can ensure the confidentiality of that mediation process, and that we have the control settings to make sure that we don't have people joining without us knowing about it, and that in particular, that we can do breakout rooms. And this, a lot of mediations are conducted using what we call a shuttle style, where you have the parties separated and the mediator is moving back and forth between the rooms. Zoom allows you to create that virtually, and it also allows you to control who goes into which room, so that you don't have to worry about somebody entering a private room that they shouldn't be in. And that's not something that is a common feature in these types of platforms. Let me move along here. So Sheila had some other considerations because she's thinking about this from the perspective of a deposition. So Sheila, I'm going to hand this one over to you.
Okay, as Diane said, of course, HIPAA compliance and attorney-client privilege is a big issue for court reporters as well. And ease of usability is super important. The official record still remains the technical record, the actual transcript itself. So we've had some colleagues make comments across the United States regarding is the recording on a remote platform part of the official record. We do not view that as being such. And we've got a lot of data to cover here. Ooh, I'm so sorry. So sorry. I'm going to shut my phone off.
So when we get to the tips slide, we'll talk about, if you're going to host a Zoom meeting, how important it is to shut off the ringer on your phone before you start.
I remembered to do that. It's a little difficult when you're working from home. It used to be that from a court reporter's perspective on remote platforms, the witness was always with us, so we can control that environment. So when we're working from home, it's a little bit more challenging. We also have to be, as court reporters, very mindful of handling off-the-record discussions clearly, and how that impacts one's ability to do that if you are doing this remotely. I'm going to skip down on the audio clarity and delay. And so when you're looking for looking at remote proceedings, I want to encourage you to think about the news media that we're seeing now, where there are delays. And so you have to be, I would encourage you to be very mindful of speaking a little slower when you're on, we'll just say Zoom. And I've also been encouraging our clients to just kind of dumb it down. And rather than using your remote on your computer, but to simply mute your remote on your computer and use the old telephone for your audio connection. Because if you lose your Zoom connection, you're still going to revert back to a regular telephone deposition or telephone proceeding. So we're going to skip over to the next. You're up.
Yeah, and I will say that being able to dial in has been really great if you do not have the super high speed internet connection that many of us enjoy here in Chattanooga with EPB. Being able to dial in is a really good option to help reduce the amount of data that's going over your internet connection. And if you're having trouble with the audio breaking up, that actually can solve that problem for you. Okay, so moving right along, the other things that we have to ask ourselves when we move to an online model is what are the legal considerations, which of course you all are far more qualified to answer that question than I am. For the most part, I am not an attorney, and I know most of you are. But as somebody who has been in the business of owning responsibility for software solutions, we have to think about what are the risks that we take. And there is a risk that there could be a breach, your session could be hacked, and you want to think about that. What are my contingency plans if I get Zoom bombed? And I don't know if you've all heard of Zoom bombing, but that's a thing now, and we'll talk about that in just a second. I have added some terms to our engagement contracts for mediations that basically says you need to be responsible. A client needs to be responsible for for the security and confidentiality at their end of the meeting, because I don't have control over who is in the room with that person. I don't have control over who can see what they're doing, or if they're sharing screens with somebody that I don't even know is there. So there's a responsibility that the party at each end has to take for making sure that things stay confidential. On the flip side, it's not necessarily that different from in-person meetings. We've had mediations where somebody was sitting there texting with another party while they were sitting in their mediation. And so they're sharing information even when they're in person anyway. So to a certain extent, that aspect is not necessarily significantly different, except that they could have somebody in the room with them and I might not know that they're there. In the event that, so I don't know, you guys, did you guys hear about the first Zoom Chattanooga City Council meeting that happened last week? And it was Zoom bombed with somebody entering chat messages that were hate messages throughout the meeting. Give me a thumbs up if you heard about that. Yay, you're all still awake. Okay, so this is a thing that is happening very extensively, and the FBI is actually now investigating. This is the downside about having a solution that is widely adopted. Having an adopted solution where lots and lots of people know about it and use it is a good thing when you're trying to encourage people to feel comfortable jumping on. Even if they've never used Zoom before, at a minimum, they will have heard of it and they'll think, oh, maybe that's something that I should learn about. However, the downside of widely adopted technology is that it becomes a target for hackers because there's a bigger potential group of people that can be harmed if you target a particular technology. The reason why Microsoft Windows has so many viruses and other problems besides its inherent weaknesses as an operating system, which I won't talk about, is because it was so broadly adopted. There's a big payoff if you're trying to hack people, if you develop viruses for something that lots of people have. So similarly, Zoom bombing has become a thing. Zoom has gone from an average of 1 million teleconferences or web conferences a day to 10 million web conferences a day in the last like 1.5 months. So all of a sudden we've got people who are trying to coordinate attacks on people's Zoom meetings. When you entered this Zoom meeting, you entered in a waiting room. That is a way to prevent Zoom bombing. I also had a registration feature on, so you had to register in order to get a link to join this meeting. That is another way to help prevent Zoom bombing. we'll talk about a few more of the features that you can use that help prevent some of the risks associated with Zoom in particular. The other thing I do want to mention on this is that Zoom has recently come under criticism as to whether the level of encryption that they have claimed they are providing is the actual level of encryption that they are providing. And they have committed to improve some of their security over the next few weeks. So I just want to give you a heads up about that, that if you're thinking about adopting Zoom, it might be worth waiting a couple of weeks just if you're a little worried about the security aspects. And then we talked a little bit about the possibility that there might be people in the room at the other end that we can't see that are hearing our conversation and seeing the documents that we're sharing that we may not be able to see through the camera. And Sheila, you want to talk about the deposition considerations?
Yes, just quickly on your deposition subpoenas. In past, the location has always been that of the witness. Usually, again, that's not been a problem because the witness has been in the presence of the court reporter. So you may want to give some thought to how you're going to phrase the location of your subpoena. And to also be very mindful on your exhibits. This is a litigious situation, of course, but attorneys really have to work more and more hand in hand on exchanging exhibits, making sure that the witness has those in their hands prior to the proceeding beginning. Also, I would encourage counsel to make sure that everyone is clear on who is in the room. Just like Diane said, that comes right back to attorney-client privilege as well. And as well on administering the oath. In Tennessee, court reporters are licensed. That is not the case in all states. And under our license, we're able to administer the oath. There's an attorney general's opinion that's a very old, very, very old opinion that was back when we actually were required to be notaries. And it provided for counsel to be able to stipulate on the record for a court reporter to administer the oath outside the presence of the court reporter. Of the witness. So we're the court reporters in Tennessee are certainly taking the position that certainly would apply for remote depositions as well. However, if your deposition is being taken or your witness is in another state, your case is filed in another state, you're going to be driven by that state's requirements on being able to administer the oath. And that may or may not be something that the attorneys are going to be able to stipulate to have it taken remotely. Several states have stepped up and are still stepping up to provide temporary remote notaries online, but that's certainly not the case across the board. And we've got here who is the deponent and what access do they have. Keep in mind that at the end of the day, your record is it's only usable, it's as good as you make it, in other words. So your witness might be, they may be in jail and they don't have access to good internet access. They may only have a burner phone, so they can still attend via a cell phone, but it might not be the very best record that you're going to have. So it's all going to be driven on the equipment that your witness has and whether or not they have a reliable phone. Also, your reading and signing of your transcript. I would encourage counsel to communicate prior to your proceeding and decide how that is going to be handled. Court reporters can certainly send that to the witness if they so choose, the witness chooses to read and sign. We can certainly send that electronically in a read-only format. Or is that something that you're going to be comfortable with the witness coming to your office to read and sign? We're also, let's see here. I think that's we need to go pretty quickly to allow more time for Diane. Okay, that's all I got right now.
Okay. So I'm going to accelerate through the next several slides. These are mostly just thought, things to think about as you're determining how you want to set up a meeting, and things to think about, some tips on making sure that the meeting goes well. And so I'm just going to kind of tell you a few high level on these slides, and then I'm going to skip into demoing what I'm seeing to you so that you can see what it's like to actually host a meeting yourself. So basically some of the questions that you want to start with are, who is this meeting with, and how important is it to control all of these privacy settings and everything else? For example, if I were, well, we used Zoom last weekend to celebrate my dad's 80th birthday. And we had a Zoom with a few family members from around the globe, and we had a toast, and we were just being social. I was not concerned about muting people. I was not concerned about turning off sharing of documentation. I was not concerned about a lot of the settings that I am concerned about when I'm having a large meeting with people that I don't necessarily know. So you just want to consider who is your audience, who are you going to be doing this with, and making sure that you think through the kinds of controls that might be higher risk given your particular audience. One that comes to mind, there is a function that I could turn on that would allow each of you individually to chat with anybody else in the meeting privately. And that can be a good thing. It can also be potentially a bad thing. If I were having a family mediation, I might not want to turn that on because I may not know if there are domestic violence issues, for example, that one party could be harassing the other privately and I would not know about it. So these are the kinds of things where you want to think about who is being invited to participate and what are the kinds of potential issues that would be a detriment to what you're trying to achieve. On tips for meeting settings, this is a list of things that when you actually sit down and try and go set your meeting settings, this will make more sense because you can control a lot of features. Now, I'm going to point out one of these in particular. You might notice that I have the Ohio State shoe behind me. If you don't recognize the Ohio State shoe, I'm really sorry. You should try and see it sometime. Jerry and I go back and forth when we get on Zoom, on the same Zoom. He always puts the UT Stadium behind him, so this is my revenge. But I'm going to show you something that, I don't show just anyone. I'm going to show you the mess behind me, and I'm going to stop sharing the slides in order to do that, and you'll see why I'm using a background screen. So this is almost literally sharing my dirty laundry. So I'm going to do a share via AirPlay from my cell phone. And this is going to allow me to actually connect my phone. Oops, there we go. So now you should see an image. Do you see a little square that shows screen mirroring on my phone? Give me a thumbs up. Okay. So I'm going to switch to my camera and you're going to be able to see my mess. Okay. So this is my former home office that used to be very neat because I worked in an industry that had no paper. All of my files fit in that one file drawer down there. I had a second desk and lots of space, and it was great. However, since coming to work into an office, I have turned this into an extra guest bedroom. And so the bed is now my extra desk space for all the paper that we use in the legal industry. And so I have wanted to clean this up so that you're not looking at the mess behind me. And in doing so, I chose to enable a feature that is that you all actually have. You either turn it on or you don't. It's on for everyone or it's on for no one. It's not on for both of you. Let me stop sharing here. Okay, but all of you, I'm going to share my desktop here, which is if in my list of things not to do, sharing your desktop is a kind of a dangerous thing to do. You want to be a little bit cautious about how we, uh, what we have open on our desktop when we decide to share our desktop. So you can all see what I'm seeing right now, right? Does that look like what I'm seeing? And you, all right, thank you for the thumbs up. So you can probably see, like, I have some extra buttons that you don't have because I am the host of this meeting. And all of you, however, if you were to go to your Zoom preferences, have the option of setting your own virtual background. And this is one of those features that Zoom bombers will use to apparently use very graphic and potentially pornographic images if they're trying to disrupt your meeting. So it is something to use judiciously. For me personally, I like that it cleans up the room for me and I don't have to figure out what am I going to do with all this junk that I've got lying around right before I get on a call. Okay. And then I mentioned, I see I have a chat question on how do we start recordings. The recording is actually up here on my screen right now because I am already recording. And so the pause and the stop are up here. I believe that I started it from down here where you see pause, stop recording here as well. So there's a button down here if you ever want to record the meeting. Now I have this meeting set so that you don't have the option of recording it. Only I as the host have the option of recording it. There's also a feature that allows you to automatically record every session that you're in. I suggest that you don't turn that on because especially in the mediation world, this is a confidential proceeding. We do not want to make a recording of our mediations. That is not a record that we want to have to worry about keeping confidential. The other thing that you'll see is that I have this manage participants option, which is popping up in my other monitor. And I have the ability, you can see I've got you all muted. And I also have this lovely, like, let's say that Jerry Tidwell was being a real problem over there. And I wanted to kick him off the meeting. So I'd have this more option and I can turn off his video. I can actually remove him from the meeting altogether. I can put him in the waiting room. And boy, that would be very handy a lot of the time. So, sorry, honey, but that is something that you can definitely use if you do have an instance of Zoom bombing, if you have somebody who is just behaving inappropriately, if you have somebody that is not paying attention. And I got to tell you, one of the most annoying things that used to happen I was a product manager for quite a few years, and we would have these big meetings with like 40 people on a conference call. And we'd be sharing a screen and looking through, our project manager would be going through the project plan, and you'd have like 5 people that were interested in any topic and 35 people that were just bored, waiting for somebody to say something of interest to them. And invariably, somebody would put the call on hold and take another call and have hold music on their phone, and the hold music would just play and play and play, and you couldn't talk over it, and you'd have to figure out who the heck's line is that, and you'd have to go mute them. So having the ability to unmute all and mute all can be really powerful, and you also have the option of allowing people to unmute themselves. So in the event that you had somebody that forgot that they left their microphone on, and they were totally disrupting the meeting, even unintentionally, you could mute everybody, and then you could have the setting that allows everyone to unmute themselves when they want to talk. So the other thing that I want to point out on the left-hand side on my screen here, I have the mute and the stop video buttons. Everybody has these buttons. You have control over whether your video is on or off. I happened to set this meeting so that when you joined, you were automatically, your video was on and your audio was on, but it was muted. And you can choose how to let people come into the meeting. And then again, they can, if you are not muted and you're on a meeting, if you have your video on, you just want to make sure that you remember that those two things are on. I don't know how many of you remember the Steve Martin movie where he was wearing a wireless mic and walked into the men's room without turning it off. But these are the kinds of things that happen on online, especially work from home collaboration. People forget that I'm in the office now, I'm not at home now. and they start doing things that they think nobody's paying attention, and they've completely forgotten that they're on video, that their sound is on. And it can be very, very embarrassing. I have seen some really crazy things happen on collaboration meetings. So you just want to be conscious that you're on camera, you're on audio, and use these mute and stop video buttons to avoid embarrassment. Okay. All right, so let me go back to the slides for a second here. I'm kind of covering some of my tips as I talk through this. Okay. So, you know, we mentioned earlier just making sure that you know who your audience is going to be and making sure that you have an appropriate setting for that particular audience. And, you know, sitting around our table out on our deck with champagne glasses is perfectly appropriate for my dad's 80th birthday. Not so appropriate for a mediation, obviously. If you have a quiet space, and this is something that I did also include in the mediation instructions for online, is that we expect each participant to have a quiet place, that they're going to be uninterrupted, that they are not responsible for caring for children during the meeting, those kinds of things, so that you can be very effective and focused on what you're doing. Making sure that you clean up your computer desktop. So you want to close documents, and just in case you end up sharing the whole desktop like I just did, we don't want to have things that are confidential information of somebody else appearing on the screen while we're talking about to an audience that shouldn't be seeing that. And then one of the other things that I think is really handy about a, let's see, I'm gonna see if I can get to my other screen here. So this is just something I'll show you if I can get this out of my end show here for a second. Stop share. I'm going to go back to sharing my display again. If you happen to have a Mac, and I honestly don't recall, it's been so long since I've used a Windows machine. IBM actually started handing out MacBooks instead of ThinkPads in about 2014, I think it was. So believe it or not, I actually even had a MacBook when I worked for IBM. But there is a control here that says do not disturb, and it will pop up and let you turn off all your notifications. So if you put that on your sleep, kind of like your iPhone has the moon symbol, then you don't get all the things popping up that you may not want popping up during a webinar. I'm gonna now switch over to the browser. And
Diane, just quickly, a question. One attendee wants to know if the seminar outline can be shared with attendees at the completion.
Sure, I can share the presentation, and I can also share the recording link too, if you'd like to rewatch this. Okay, so I just want to show you that there are a lot of options that you can set. So when you're actually setting up a meeting and preparing to host it, there are all these choices that you can make about what things you want on automatically, what things you want off automatically. And I just want to point out a couple of really useful ones or important ones. So one is this: use personal meeting ID. Do not use that. That is an ongoing ID that is usable forever. And so anybody that gets it can always join your Zoom when you use that. And you don't want that. That is how you get Zoom bombed. You can use only authenticated users can join meetings, meaning you had to actually log in to join this meeting. Now, you may not have known you logged in, because I also used the link that you had. You see this in embed password and meeting link for one-click join. That link has that password embedded in it, so that you should not have had to have entered that separately, making it easier for you to join. This does mean if you share this link with other people, they will also be able to join. And that is a reason why I really like this waiting room feature, because when people join through the waiting room, they are kind of put in purgatory, so to speak, and it allows me to potentially kick anybody back into the waiting room and not let them rejoin if they're being a problem child. I have things like, don't let my participants save chat, because again, I just don't want people to take stuff home with them necessarily that they shouldn't be taking home from a meeting, like in particular, a confidential mediation. And you're going to see a pop-up that gives you a end of meeting experience feedback survey. It's a thumbs up or thumbs down, and it gives you the opportunity just to click, yeah, that was a good experience, or no, that was not a good experience. And it tells Zoom how the quality of the meeting was from their perspective. So it's a little bit useful. I use this co-host feature to have Sheila co-hosting with me today. And you can also do polls that allow you to ask questions of attendees, and that would be kind of a interesting thing to do. I actually even created a poll, and I can launch that to you, and you now should be seeing an opportunity to respond to my poll. And this is just a few questions that are true or false that you can respond to, and this will not identify you individually, but it will just give you, give me a count of how many of you responded which way. So these were just a few interesting questions. This can be really useful for getting a little bit of feedback from your audience, particularly at the beginning of a presentation or at the end of a presentation, where you are presenting to them and they're not really having the opportunity to participate fully or conversationally. I'm going to give you about 15 more seconds to vote on these. It looks like about 15 of you have now responded. So, all right, I'm going to end the poll. And we have an idea here that most of you do have a dedicated office space at home. Less than half of you are using 2 monitors or more when you work. 89% of you have used online collaboration applications before. And 89% of you saying that you need to be able to do this. So that's, thank you for participating. The other thing I wanted to show you is this breakout room concept. I know we have some other mediators on the call, and I think this will be of particular interest for anybody that's hosting a meeting where you need to have private breakout sessions. And I have the ability to assign participants. I'm going to assign David Noblet. I saw you there. And I saw Joe Manuel, and I saw Rick Marcus. Okay, so I'm going to assign the 3 of you to your own private breakout room. Oh, and Vanessa, they are too. Okay. And, and now I'm going to open all rooms, and you should see an invitation to go into that private meeting room. And now they're going to disappear for the rest of us as they accept that invitation. And they're now off in their own private room and they can't hear me anymore. They're just talking amongst themselves. We can't hear them. And none of you can sneak into that room with them unless I assign you to that room. So it gives them a private place to go have a discussion where the rest of us can't hear what they're saying.
Diane,
And then, yeah.
I was going to say on in a deposition setting, then that would be super important for an attorney to be able to meet privately with their client.
Oh, yeah, great point. Yeah. Okay, close the room in 30 seconds. Okay, so I'm going to broadcast a message to them in that private room and let them know that I'm about to close that room, so they should wrap up their conversation. If they were actually, you know, having a client attorney meeting over there, I would probably broadcast something like, hey, we'd like to get back on track here. Are you guys wrapping up? And ask them to come back when they're done instead of closing the room on them. But I'm going to go ahead and close this room now. And are you all able to see this breakout room window, or am I sharing the other window right now? You see it? Okay, good. This is one thing that's confusing about having two screens, is sometimes you lose track of which one you're sharing. So I've closed the room and now there they are, they're back. Did you all have a good discussion over there without us? Yeah, okay. Okay. So I have a few more tips that are in the slides, and I think, you know, one of the ones that I'll just point out is you really don't want to forget that you're on video. I have really seen some really horrifying things on video calls because people forgot that they were on video. But there are 3 slides of tips for both setting up the meeting, preparing how to get ready for actually starting the meeting, and then for things that you want to be conscious about when you're in the meeting. And we are running horribly over time. I apologize for that, but I'm going to now try unmuting everybody, and we'll see if total chaos ensues. And then if you have any questions that you would like to ask, we'll see if we can do that in an organized way. Yeah, remute yourself if you've got a lot of background noise or you don't want to talk. That would probably be helpful. Leading and filling a vacuum being created by the president's. Well, we have somebody playing the news. So, Vanessa, how was your conversation with Rick and David and Joe?
Well, it was, I understand that it's important to unmute your microphone.
That does make it easier to talk.
Is there a limit on the number of hosts?
Yes. So I'm going to actually mute everybody again for a second. Because we've got a little bit more background noise than I can deal with. You all have the ability to unmute yourselves. You should be able to unmute yourself at will. So if you do want to chime in, feel free to do that. But to answer your question, David, the host is, so you need to have a license, or you can use the free version. The free version of Zoom limits your meetings to 40 minutes. If you have a license, then you can actually start the meeting, schedule the meeting, and then you can make somebody else a co-host. I don't know how many co-hosts, if there's a limit to that or not, but in terms of being able to actually schedule the meetings and plan the meetings, you need to have your own account. But it will allow the basic license, which I believe I bought 12 months at one time for something like $167 roughly for a year. So it's something that runs like $15, $18 a month to subscribe to the pro level, and you can have up to 100 participants, meaning you're all on video, etc. And then you can also have additional people who are just able to listen and watch, but that are not going to be able to talk or share their video. Those subscriptions will go up to, you can actually add a webinar feature if you wanted to do huge audiences, and I believe that those go up to somewhere in the neighborhood of 10,000 people if you wanted to do like really big webinars. So they have a pretty flexible licensing structure, and it's pretty affordable. Okay, if anybody else wants to ask anything, see if you can find your unmute button. And if you can't, give me a chat and I'll help you unmute.
Diane?
Yeah.
Attendees can also hold down their space bar to temporarily unmute themselves. Also, there's another question that says, do the features differ between paid and free license?
The free license has the 40-minute limit, so it will literally hang up the call on you at 40 minutes if you do not have a paid license. And there are probably a smaller limit on participants. I know that the number of participants goes up as you add higher level licenses. So I imagine that the free version also has a limit on the number of participants that's smaller.
We have another question. If you want to use the option to make a participant a host, do they need to be licensed?
No, I can actually make somebody a host who does not have a license themselves while we're in a call. I cannot make you a host so that you can start your own call without me, but I can make you a host once we're on the same call.
Your emphasis on the intention at the time of the execution. Do you not have common law and
Rob, turn off your mic.
If they can determine
Diane?
Yes.
When we've used this before, we have used Zoom, there was also a hand-raising feature or a clapping feature. Where is that found?
That is, there is under reactions. Am I still sharing the screen? Can you see my reactions button? Okay. So you can do like a thumbs up here, and we did a literal thumbs up, and we could clap. There is, you know, I honestly am not seeing the hand raising feature. Does anybody see an option to raise their hand?
It's under participant.
Yeah.
Under participant. I guess I don't have that option. Oh, there, we have a raised hand. Thank you, Troy.
Probably because we're hosts.
Yeah.
Also, I can't recall who it was asked the difference between a paid license and a free. Keep in mind that only one meeting can happen at the same time. You have to have multiple licenses if you intend to have multiple meetings. So if you're having two depositions at the same time, you'll need two separate licenses.
Yeah, that's a good point.
There has been a recommended to, rather than starting your proceedings or your meetings at a specific, say 4 o'clock, to right now to stagger those and maybe make it at 4:05, 4:10, 4:15, as opposed to say 4 o'clock, 4:30, because there are so many folks using the internet right now. Normally that's not a problem, but given the climate we're in now, it seems to be an issue.
Yeah. I see we have a couple more questions from David. So you should have a toolbar, I believe on a tablet, it is actually at the upper left. Whereas, so if you're on a phone, a tablet, or a laptop, or a computer, it looks a little bit different. So everybody does have a toolbar, but what the options are going to be different for a participant than what's in the options for a host. The other thing, if you're setting up a mediation and you send an invitation with an embedded password, I like that method because it allows people to join with the least headache. Again, it is something that you're counting on them to not share that link, because anytime somebody forwards the information to join a meeting, then anybody who has that information can in fact join, unless you require them to actually log into Zoom. Then that does help eliminate that. I'm always trying to balance usability against security. One of the security experts that I worked with on one of the product lines I managed, he was quite humorous, but we used to get into battles about, well, we need to be able to do this, and that if we do that, that will be totally unusable. And his, my favorite quote of his was that the only way to completely secure information is to make sure that no one has any access to it. So of course that means that you would need to unplug your computer and pull out the battery if you wanted to make sure that your computer was completely secure. And at that point, it would be absolutely useless to you. So there's always this inherent tension between making something user-friendly and making something really secure. And generally speaking, the easier it is to use, the less secure it is. So you kind of have to balance between those two and decide what risks that you're taking. My feeling is that because I can manage people once they join, I can kick them out and I can prevent them from rejoining. In fact, I didn't show you, but there is an option, I believe it's over here. No, that's my chat options. Where's my manage participants? That I can actually lock this meeting and prevent anybody else from joining. So see this lock meeting here? That would allow me to prevent anybody new from joining once we started the meeting. And that is another reason why I feel like it's okay to send the link with the embedded password to the participants, because I'm going to be able to tell if there's anybody else joining this meeting, kick them out, lock the meeting, and keep them from disrupting the mediation. And then the last one I see is that you have the app on your telephone. Is that a free service, or is that the minimally paid for service? Okay, so putting the app on your telephone is free. The part that if you want to host a meeting for 40 minutes, that's free. If you want to actually host a meeting that goes longer than 40 minutes or has more participants than the free version, then you need to purchase a license. So it's basically until you try to do something that isn't free, they're not going to charge you. So, or basically, if you use their free service, if you host a meeting, when you get to 40 minutes, the meeting will end. And we actually at IBM, IBM had a Lotus Notes, and they tried to grow it into an online set of tools that were almost they were just not very easy to use. And I had my last role at IBM was a strategic alliances manager. And so I was meeting with other software companies all the time. And we always had to use their online service because nobody could ever join ours. And we started using Zoom, and we'd use the free app, and we'd try to limit our meetings to 40 minutes because IBM didn't want to pay for it. And we finally, IBM gave up and said, yes, this is a better tool. Let's just buy subscriptions for people. So, but yeah, it's a little tricky if you're going to just use the free service to always limit your meetings to 40 minutes. In fact, we were supposed to be at 30 minutes today, and we're already at an hour. So I guess we should probably start wrapping up at this point. Does anybody have any more questions that we have not answered?
Gosh, a room full of attorneys that are quiet.
What were the phone numbers that you that came up earlier? And did you do that for us?
I'm,
The phone
there was
number that were on that lead in.
a phone number that was on the lead-in.
Yeah, there are about 8 of them, depending on where you were to call them.
Oh, that was for you to attend. If you wanted to attend via telephone for the audio part, you could pick up the phone and use that selected telephone number.
Thank you. Thank you.
Yeah, and actually we have an example of somebody who, you know, part of their phone number has been blanked out, but for their protection, but that is an example of somebody who is dialed in via a telephone, and you just see a partially obscured phone number, and that's telling us that that person cannot see the video, or actually they could, because you can actually dial in for the audio and still join online, but just not connect your audio online as well. So that's also a possibility.
That's it.
All right, well, the last thing you need to know is how to leave a meeting. And that is a button on my screen. It's down in the lower right here. And I can actually end the meeting for all, but just so you know, for the future, you can always leave a meeting by clicking on your leave meeting button. Thank you all for joining us. We really appreciate it.
Great
Good
job.
luck and stay healthy.
Thanks, Diane.